A poor girl mistakes the millionaire CEO's car for an Uber. What happens melts his heart. Before we start the story, comment below the city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Rain was pouring down on the sidewalks of downtown Chicago. Taxi horns blared. Lights blurred through the sheets of water falling from a dark sky. And then there she was, a girl in a thin, soaked hoodie, hugging a paper bag to her chest as she darted between cars. Her shoes mismatched, waterlogged, her jeans torn at the knees, her hands trembling from cold, but still shielding the bag as if it were something sacred. She looked left, then right, and then she saw it. A black town car pulling up by the curb, sleek, luxurious engine humming low. Ella Alvarez didn't hesitate. She yanked the rear door open and tumbled in, dripping wet. Finally, "You have no idea how long I've been waiting. Can we please go?" "I'm so late," she gasped between breaths. The driver turned around from the front seat, confusion in his eyes. But it wasn't the driver who reacted first. From the back seat, a man in a dark navy suit slowly turned his head. Sharp jawline, tie loosened, eyes the color of winter steel. Mason Blake, CEO of Blake Enterprises, worth over $3 billion. A man who didn't speak unless necessary, and when he did, people listened. Now he simply blinked at the girl who just burst into his car like a hurricane. Ella, panting, finally looked to her left and froze. "That's not the driver." Her breath hitched. "I had thought this was the app said." She scrambled to get out, but then Mason did something unexpected. He reached over and gently pulled the door closed. "Where are you headed?" he asked, voice calm, almost amused. "I am sorry," she whispered. "This isn't I didn't mean to get in. I thought you were the Uber." A pause. Mason's lips curved, just slightly, not quite a smile, more like curiosity. "Where are you headed?" he asked again. Ella swallowed hard. Roosevelt Avenue, 36th and Elm. Mason glanced at the driver. "Take her." The driver looked through the rearview mirror, unsure. "Sir." "Drive," Mason said, eyes still on her. And just like that, the car merged into traffic. Ella sat frozen, the bag in her arms clutched tight. Silence filled the cabin. Mason didn't speak. He didn't ask questions. He just watched her. And she pretended not to notice. But every part of her was screaming, "What is happening right now?" Minutes passed. The car moved through glowing red lights, past glass buildings and late-night diners. Ella's breath finally began to settle. She looked at her reflection in the tinted window and cringed. Wet hair clinging to her cheeks, dark circles under her eyes. She looked like everything she was: a nobody, a broke girl trying to deliver pastries at midnight to cover rent. And she was sitting beside a man in a suit that probably cost more than her entire year's wages. She didn't know who he was, not yet. All she knew was that he was quiet and still, and somehow not angry. That alone surprised her. Finally, the car slowed. "We're here," the driver said. Ella fumbled for the door handle. "Thank you. I really didn't mean to bother." "You forgot something," Mason said. She turned. He pointed at the paper bag. She blinked. "It's not yours." "I wasn't taking it," he replied. "Just thought you were leaving in a hurry." "Oh, right." She hugged it tighter, then opened the door and stepped out into the rain. She didn't look back. Not once. But Mason did. Through the misted window, he watched her run up the steps of a dimly lit apartment building, holding the bag above her head. She disappeared behind the door. Silence returned. The driver glanced back. "Should I return to the penthouse, sir?" Mason said nothing. He just leaned back, eyes still on the place where she vanished. A poor girl. Wet, rushed, panicked. And yet something in her voice, her urgency, the way she spoke like the world was on fire, and she still had something to save. He didn't know her name, but somehow, she stayed in his mind the entire ride home. Something about the way she didn't beg, didn't apologize too much, didn't even ask for help. She thought she was a mistake in his car. But for Mason Blake, she might have just been the beginning of something he didn't see coming. Not yet, but soon. The next morning, Mason Blake stood by the tall windows of his penthouse. The city looked different from this height, silent, efficient, as if nothing below could touch him. But his thoughts weren't with the skyline. They were with a girl who mistook his car for an Uber. He hadn't planned to remember her. People came and went in his world: models, investors, fake smiles, and carefully managed conversations. But her? She ran in like a storm and somehow left his world quieter. A knock. Mr. Blake, his assistant, Harper, peeked in. He turned. Schedule. Board meeting at 10. Conference call with Seoul at noon. And your mother's gala at 7. Mason barely reacted. But then, after a moment, cancel the gala. Harper blinked. Sir? Reschedule. Or send a donation in my name. Whatever. She nodded, confused. Anything else? He hesitated, then said, I need someone found. That same day, across the river in a neighborhood where landlords barely patched walls and plumbing always creaked, Ella carried the plastic grocery bags up for flights of stairs. Inside the apartment, a little boy, maybe 10, coughed weakly as he sat bundled into sweaters on a threadbare couch. Hey, she said gently, kneeling beside him. Got you soup. He tried to smile, with the little stars, the only kind worth having. He laughed softly, then coughed again. Ella's eyes dimmed. She placed the bags down, poured soup into a cracked bowl, and brushed his hair back. Is it bad today, Caleb? He shrugged, just tired. She kissed his forehead, trying to hide the worry creeping into her chest. The doctor said they'd need better medication, but the program required insurance, and she barely made enough to pay rent, let alone anything extra. Still, she smiled. Guess what happened last night? What? I got in the wrong car. His eyes widened. You stole a car. What? No. She laughed. I thought it was an Uber. It wasn't. Was the driver mad? He wasn't the driver. Who was it? She paused. I don't know. Just some guy. Rich. In a suit. Did he yell? No. He let me stay. He asked where I was going, and he took me. Caleb looked impressed. Maybe he was a superhero. She scoffed. Superheroes don't wear cufflinks. But something in her tone betrayed her. A flicker. A warmth. Caleb noticed. You liked him. I didn't even know him. But you liked him. She smiled despite herself. Eat your soup. Meanwhile, Mason stared at the report on his desk. Ella Alvarez, 22, dropped out of community college, working part-time. Legal guardian to younger brother, Caleb Alvarez, age 10. Medical history, chronic asthma. Under Medicaid waitlist. No criminal record. He exhaled. No scandals, no red flags. Just hardship. He remembered how she clutched the bag like it held her whole world. And maybe, to her, it did. He stood abruptly. Cancel the rest of my meetings, he told Harper. I'm going out. That evening, Ella stepped out of the grocery store, arms full of clearance bread and discounted fruit. She didn't see the sleek black town car parked across the street. She didn't see Mason leaning against it, arms crossed, until she turned and froze. He didn't smile, just looked at her and said, I owe you a ride. Ella blinked. What are you doing here? I had time to kill. Do CEOs usually loiter near grocery stores? I don't know, he said. I've never followed one home before. She stepped back. Wait, are you stalking me? Not stalking, he said calmly, following. Her jaw dropped. That's literally the same thing. Not when you're curious. Ella looked around. Do you always do this? Chase random girls who get in your car by mistake? No, Mason said, stepping closer. Just you. She tightened her grip on the groceries. Why? He was quiet. Then. Because you didn't ask me for anything. She frowned. What? You didn't beg. Didn't take advantage. You didn't even look at me properly. I didn't want to. I was embarrassed. That's rare. She stared at him. So what do you want now? Dinner. She blinked again. What? Let me buy you dinner. Ella snorted. You think because you're rich, you can just... No. He interrupted. I think because I'm interested, I can ask. She hesitated. The cold wind picked up, The bread bag slipped slightly in her hands. He stepped forward. I won't ask again. She looked up at him. Rain started again, soft and slow. She exhaled. Fine, but not some fancy place. I can't afford to pretend. He smiled. Finally. Good. Because I can't stand pretense. An hour later, they sat in a tiny diner off 12th Street, cracked vinyl booths, greasy menus. The waitress called everyone on. Ella drank hot cocoa like it was gold. Mason stirred his black coffee. You always this quiet? She asked. You always this suspicious? She smirked. I'm just trying to figure out your angle. He leaned in. Maybe I don't have one. You're a billionaire. You always have an angle. He said nothing, but when their food arrived, grilled cheese for her, blackened salmon for him, she noticed he didn't touch it, just watched her. You're weird, she muttered. And you're honest, he said. Is that a bad thing? It's why I'm here. She chewed slower. Her walls, built high over years of disappointment, started to tremble. And somewhere deep down she was scared of what might happen if they fell. The rain had stopped by the time they stepped out of the diner. Streetlights reflected off wet pavement. Steam rose from manhole covers. The city hummed around them. But in that moment, it felt quiet. Ella walked beside Mason, hands in her pockets, eyes straight ahead. She didn't ask for his car. She didn't assume he'd offer a ride, and that intrigued him. Mason glanced sideways. Where to? She shrugged. It's late. I should get home. He nodded. I'll take you. She stopped. No. He raised a brow, still worried I'm a serial stalker. A little, she said, half smiling. But mostly I don't like owing people. You don't. I do even now. He stepped closer. Let me change your mind. Ella looked up at him. You're not used to people saying no, are you? He didn't answer, just opened the passenger door of his car and waited. She hesitated, then sighed and got in. The car moved through the city, quiet except for the soft hum of tires on wet streets. Mason spoke first. You live with your brother. She nodded. Caleb, 10, asthma, loves comic books and hates homework. You raise him alone? No other choice. He was quiet. Then, gently, where are your parents? She looked out the window. Gone. Dad left. Mom died. Life happened. Mason didn't push, but something in his chest pulled tight. He remembered being 9. His mother's perfume fading. His father's voice always coming from behind a door. Loneliness, he realized, wasn't always loud. Sometimes. It just sat quietly like a bruise that never faded. Ella spoke again. You don't act like a CEO. No, you're not fake. He smirked, disappointed. A little, she teased, then added, more softly, but also not. When they reached her building, Mason got out and opened her door, something no one had ever done for her before. She looked up the crumbling stairwell, then turned. Thank you for dinner. He nodded. Ella lingered a moment, then added, voice hesitant. You don't have to do this. You don't owe me anything. I'm just a mistake in your car. Mason shook his head. No, Ella, you were never a mistake. Her breath caught. She looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. I should go. He nodded. Can I see you again? She hesitated. Then, I don't date billionaires. I'm just a guy who got mistaken for an Uber. That made her smile, just a little. Good night, Mason. And then she disappeared into the dark stairwell. Back in his penthouse, Mason poured a drink and stared out the window. Something about her wouldn't leave him. Not her story, not her stubbornness, but the way she looked at him like he wasn't made of money. But something else, something breakable. He didn't know why it mattered, but it did. Across town, Ella lay awake, listening to Caleb's breathing. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. She stared at the ceiling, then sat up and pulled out a piece of paper, an old envelope she used to write grocery lists on. She started writing. Rent due Friday. Milk, eggs, asthma meds. Don't fall for guys in suits. She underlined the last one twice. The next day, Mason sat in the boardroom while graphs and charts flashed across a giant screen. Stocks, projections, contracts. He didn't hear a word. until Harper leaned over and whispered, "Mr. Blake." He blinked. "Yes. You asked me to find opportunities with community outreach projects. One just came up, a local youth center on 39th. They're about to shut down unless someone steps in." Mason sat up straighter. "Send me the details." Harper looked surprised. "You're going?" "I'm interested in the area. And someone in it," he didn't say. 2 days later, Ella stepped into the youth center where she used to volunteer before Caleb got sick. "Hey," the director, Miss Kendra, said. "Haven't seen you in a while." "I have a few hours today," Ella smiled. "Want me to organize the book drive stuff?" Kendra nodded, then paused. "Oh, and someone's touring the center today. Big deal. Some donor. CEO type." Ella made a face. "Great. Another rich guy pretending to care. You might be surprised." Ella rolled her eyes and got to work. Half an hour later, she was bent over a donation bin when a voice behind her said, "Nice form." She turned and dropped the books in her hands. "Mason." He grinned. "Fancy meeting you here." She stared. "Are you following me again?" "No," he said. "This time, I'm just a concerned citizen." She crossed her arms. "This is your community outreach, isn't it?" "Technically, yes, but mostly, I just wanted to see you." "Why?" He stepped closer. "Because I'm not done learning who you are." Ella looked around. Children laughed in the background, paint peeled from the walls. A little girl tugged at a broken swing, and Mason, a man in a $1,000 suit, didn't seem out of place here. That unsettled her more than anything else. She swallowed. This place doesn't need charity. It needs someone who gives a damn. "I give a damn," he said, simply. She searched his face and saw no games, no arrogance, just truth. Later, as they stood near the exit, she finally said, "Why me, Mason?" He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "I'm not glamorous, not rich. I don't fit your world. I'm tired of that world, and you think I'm the alternative." He shook his head. "I think you're the only thing that feels real." Her throat tightened. She looked down. "You're not going to save me." "I'm not trying to." She looked up. "Then what are you doing?" He stepped close, trying to be near someone who doesn't need me to be perfect. For a moment, Ella didn't move. Then she whispered, "That's the scariest thing you've said yet." That night, Ella lay awake again. Not because of Caleb this time. He was sleeping peacefully, finally. Not because of stress, although the reminder was still taped to the fridge. No. Tonight her mind spun for a different reason. "Mason." She replayed his words, his face, the way he stood in that broken down youth center like he belonged, or maybe like he didn't care whether he did or not. And that scared her more than anything, because she wasn't ready for someone like him to feel real. The next morning, Mason stood on his balcony with coffee in hand, ignoring the dozen unread messages blinking on his phone. Harper had sent 3 follow-ups. Reminder, you skipped the earnings briefing. Reminder, your mother's waiting on a call. Reminder, you're not allowed to disappear like this. He didn't reply to any of them. He was thinking about a girl who didn't believe she mattered, about a life that had no space for billionaires, and how somehow that life felt more grounded than the world he built. He didn't just want to help her. He wanted to understand her. 3 days later, he sent her a text. "Mason, dinner, Friday, your pick." She didn't reply until hours later. "ELLA, fine. But if you show up in a helicopter, I'm walking." They ended up at a small Thai place tucked behind a laundromat. No valet, no wine list. The waitress wore Crocs. Ella ordered the dishes and looked surprised when Mason did the same. "You like spicy?" she asked. "I like honest food." She raised an eyebrow, still trying to impress me. "No," he said, trying not to scare you away. That silenced her for a moment. Then she sipped her tea and said, "You're not the scary part." "Then what is?" "This." She gestured between them. "This thing. Whatever we're doing. I don't get it. You don't have to. But I need to." She leaned forward. "Do you always do this?" "Do what?" "Target women who don't belong in your world." He frowned. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" She didn't blink. "Isn't it?" He leaned back, quiet. Then, I'm not targeting anyone, Ella. Then why me? Because you look me in the eye and see a man, not a wallet. Because you challenge me. Because you've never once pretended. And you think that's enough to build something on? I think it's more than I've had in years. Ella sat back, processing. Then, I don't know if I can do this. He nodded, calmly. Then we take it one moment at a time. After dinner, they walked in silence. The street was quiet. Mason offered his coat when she shivered, but she waved him off. She wasn't ready for gestures. Not yet, but when he walked her to her door, she didn't run. She looked up at him. You don't know what it's like, she said softly, to always expect someone to walk away. I do, Mason said, surprising even himself. Ella studied his face, seeing something shift there, and for the first time, she didn't speak. She just nodded, then opened her door. The next morning, everything went wrong. The landlord showed up red-faced, loud. I've waited long enough, you're behind again. Ella stood in the hallway, hands trembling. Just give me till Friday. I have to shift this week. Not my problem. Friday's the deadline, or you're out. Caleb stood behind her, peeking around the corner. The moment the door slammed shut, Ella's legs buckled. She sat down, knees to chest. This was reality. This was the line between surviving and losing everything. Mason, dinners, youth centers, those were dreams. This was war. That night, Mason waited at the diner. She didn't show. He checked his phone, nothing. Called once, no answer. He waited another hour before leaving. Ella didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out like knives. When Caleb woke up, he saw her there and whispered, "Are we okay?" She forced a smile, always, but her eyes said otherwise. The next day, Mason showed up at her building. The landlord saw him first. You're here for Alvarez? Mason raised an eyebrow. And you are? Her landlord, and she's 3 days from eviction. Mason blinked, then stared up at the building. Something twisted in his chest. He pressed the buzzer. No answer. He buzzed again and again. Still nothing. He waited, and then the door opened. Ella, face pale, eyes exhausted. Mason, you disappeared. I had to. Why? She looked away. Because this is my life. And what does that mean? That I can't afford to pretend it's a fairy tale. He stepped forward. This isn't a fairy tale. It's just me, standing here. And me, losing everything. Then let me help. I can't let you do that. Why? Because if you do this now, and walk away later, you'll take more than just the roof above me. Silence. And then, softly, I've survived a lot, Mason. But I don't think I'd survive you. Mason didn't answer right away. He just stood there, watching her standing barefoot in the doorway of a rundown building, holding on to her pride like it was the last warm coat she had. I didn't come here to break you, Ella, he finally said. She crossed her arms. No, you came here trying to fix something that doesn't want to be fixed. That's not what I see. Then maybe you're not looking hard enough. He didn't flinch. Didn't step away, but he didn't step forward either. Instead, he lowered his voice. I'm not going anywhere, even if you slam the door, even if you yell. Her chin trembled. She looked down, biting the inside of her cheek until it hurt, then said quietly, Why me, Mason? And he told her the truth. Because every time I think about you, I stop thinking about myself, and that feels like a miracle. Ella exhaled sharp, shaky, and stepped back. The door didn't slam, but it closed, softly. Later that night, Caleb climbed into bed beside her. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, was that him again? Ella didn't answer. Did you send him away? Still no reply. Caleb turned to face her in the dark. He seemed nice. She rolled to her side. People always seem nice until they leave. The next morning, Ella woke to find a brown envelope slipped under their door. No name. Inside 3 eviction notices, all stamped paid in full. And a handwritten note. No strings, no debts, just breathing room. She stared at it for a long time, then ripped it in half. She couldn't accept that, not like this. Because if she said yes to help, she'd also be saying yes to hope. and hope was dangerous. Hope had teeth. Mason sat in his office, watching the skyline. He didn't expect her to call. Didn't expect her to say thank you. He didn't want gratitude. He wanted her to stop drowning. Harper walked in. "Sir, the press is asking about your absence at the Whitmore Gala." "I didn't attend." "I know. That's why they're asking." He didn't even blink. "I'd rather invest in someone who actually needs it." Harper tilted her head. "This isn't about business anymore, is it?" "No," he said. "It's not." That afternoon, Ella got a call from the youth center. "Hey, you might want to come down here," Miss Kendra said. "Why?" "You've got a visitor." When she arrived, Mason was there surrounded by kids, listening as one boy explained how to win at dodgeball. He looked happy, not forced, not polite, just real. Ella approached cautiously. "I thought I told you not to show up with helicopters." He turned. "This is a soccer field, not a landing pad." She smirked, but her guard was still up. "You didn't have to pay my rent." "I know. I ripped the note." "I figured." "Then why?" "Because I'm not helping you." He interrupted. "I'm helping Caleb." That stopped her. Her breath hitched. "That's low." "No," Mason said softly. "That's honest." She swallowed hard, because deep down she knew everything she did, every shift she took, every sleepless night, it wasn't for herself. It was for the little boy with bright eyes and a tired chest. They sat on the swings afterward, watching the kids play. Ella stayed quiet, then finally said, "He gets sick a lot. His lungs are weak." "I know. You looked into us." "I had to." She didn't like that, but she understood it. "His dad left before he was born," she said. Didn't even care enough to ask. Mason said nothing, just listened. "I was 19. My mom had just died. I didn't even know how to fill out a lease form, let alone raise a baby. You did it anyway." She looked down, barely. "Still did." She blinked, then whispered, "You're not going to say anything sweet now?" "No," Mason said. "I think you've earned a break from everyone trying to fix you with compliments." That made her smile. "For real." That night, after they dropped off donations at the youth center, Ella let Mason walk her and Caleb home. Caleb held his hand the entire way, which surprised both of them. "I like your shoes," Caleb said. Mason looked down at his expensive Italian loafers. "They're slippery in the rain. Mine light up when I run." "Now that's an upgrade." Ella watched them, arms crossed. They reached the steps. Caleb turned to Mason. "Do you want to come up?" Ella froze, but Mason just smiled gently. "Maybe another time, kiddo." Caleb nodded like a tiny CEO, then disappeared inside. Ella lingered. "You know he doesn't trust people, ever." "Then I'm honored." They stood in silence. Then Mason asked quietly, "What are you afraid of, Ella?" She didn't answer. "Because how do you say, 'I'm afraid of wanting more, of losing the little I still have, of letting you in and then watching you leave just like everyone else did?'" Instead, she said, "Nothing. I'm not afraid." He didn't call her bluff, just nodded. "Okay." That night, she couldn't sleep again. But it wasn't from fear. It was from something far more terrifying. Hope. Mason Blake had never liked coincidences. He built an empire by reading patterns, not believing in accidents. But some things refused to stay in boxes. Like the way Caleb held his hand at night, too comfortable, too fast. Or how the boy's eyes sharp, curious, quiet felt achingly familiar. Mason shook the thought, but it didn't leave. The next day, in his office, he stared at an old photograph. A younger version of himself, hair longer, smile looser. Next to a woman he hadn't thought of in years. Melissa Alvarez. He whispered the name like a secret. His phone buzzed. "Mr. Blake," Harper's voice came through. "What is it?" "You asked me to look into Ella's records. I pulled school files. There's something odd." "Go on." "There's no father listed on Caleb's birth certificate, but Ella used to go by a different last name until she was 20. Mason stood slowly. "What name?" "Melissa Alvarez." His breath caught. No, it couldn't be. Melissa was older, confident, charming in the dangerous way. Ella wasn't her, but the last name. And Caleb. Mason stared at his reflection in the glass window, and for the first time in a long time, he felt unsure. Meanwhile, Ella scrubbed the kitchen floor with dish soap and hot water, pretending everything wasn't falling apart again. Caleb was drawing in the corner. He looked up and said, "Did Mason really build his company from scratch? He's smart, very, and quiet, like me." She paused, then turned, staring at him. "What do you mean?" Caleb shrugged. "We don't talk a lot, but I feel like he hears me." Her heart ached. She pushed the bucket aside, walked over, and sat beside him. "Do you like him?" Caleb nodded. "He feels safe." And suddenly, Ella couldn't breathe, because that was the one thing no one had ever been for her or for her brother. Safe. The next evening, Mason invited them both to a local museum hosting a free community night. "Caleb's never been," Ella said, eyeing him, "and museums aren't usually your scene." Mason smirked. "Maybe I'm learning." They walked through glass exhibits, interactive space tunnels, and fossil displays. Caleb ran ahead, his laughter echoing in marble halls. Mason and Ella trailed behind, slower. "He's got a good head," Mason said. Ella smiled. "To good. He reads more than I do." Then Mason said it carefully. "How old is he again?" 10, she replied, without thinking. He nodded. Didn't press. Didn't have to, because the math in his head was already spinning. 10. She was 19 when she had him. That year he remembered. He had been drunk, heartbroken, on the road in Arizona. A brief encounter, a woman named Melissa, someone who said she wasn't the type to get attached. They parted ways after a week. He never looked back, until now. The next morning, Mason called Harper. "I need a name." "Melissa Alvarez?" "Yes. I need her file, where she is, and whether she had a daughter." Harper hesitated. "You think?" "I don't know what I think." But he knew what he feared. Ella noticed the change. Mason became distant. Not cold, not harsh, just thoughtful, distracted, like a man solving a puzzle without all the pieces. She confronted him after a coffee run. "You've been quiet." He glanced at her. "I'm always quiet. This is different." He hesitated, then lied. "Just business things." Ella narrowed her eyes, but didn't push. Yet, later that night, Caleb had a coughing fit. Ella rushed him to the ER again. Doctors stabilized him, but bills piled up. She sat in the waiting room at dawn, head in her hands, and Mason appeared. "I came as soon as I heard." Ella looked up, exhausted. Did you have someone following me?" "I have someone keeping an eye on the hospital records, just in case." She didn't even have the energy to be mad. Instead, she whispered, "He's okay now." Mason sat beside her. "Let me help. You already paid rent. What else do you want to buy?" His jaw tightened. "I'm not buying anything, Ella. I'm trying to stay." Silence. Then, "Why does he matter so much to you?" Mason turned slowly, and this time, didn't lie. "Because there's a part of me that wonders if he's mine." Ella froze. She blinked, once, twice, then stood. "No, I'm not accusing you. No," she said louder. "You don't get to do this. Ella, I protected the boy since the day he was born. I've been mother, father, nurse, teacher, everything. You don't get to walk in and wonder if he's yours like he's a mystery to solve. I just need the truth." She stared at him and said, "Then you'll need to ask the one person who could tell you." "Who?" She swallowed. "My sister." Mason didn't move. "You're not his mother." "I never said I was." He felt the world shift beneath him. "You've been raising him since he was born. My sister Melissa, she wasn't ready. She left after a few months. I tried finding her, but she never came back." Mason sat down slowly and whispered, "So it's true." Ella crossed her arms, her voice bitter now. "What, that you slept with someone and walked away?" "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't, because women like Melissa don't leave names, and men like you don't ask." That cut deep. Mason didn't defend himself, didn't explain. He simply asked, "Can I see him?" She hesitated, then said, "He's sleeping, and he doesn't know anything, not yet. I'm not here to take him." Ella stared at him, then said, almost broken, "I believe you." Back at the apartment, Mason stood at Caleb's door. The boy slept soundly, curled under a thin blanket, his hand on a worn-out comic book. Mason didn't go in. He just stood there, watching and wondering, not if he wanted to be a father, but whether he already was one. 3 days passed, and no one said a word about it. Not Ella, not Mason, not even Caleb, though he felt the air between them shifting. Children know, even when we try to protect them, especially then. On the third night, Mason sat outside the apartment in his car, fingers tapping the leather steering wheel. In his pocket, an envelope. Inside, a cotton swab, a set of instructions, and a prepaid label for a private DNA test. All it would take was a moment, one simple swap of saliva, a truth that couldn't be unseen. But something stopped him, because once he knew, everything would change. Upstairs, Ella stood at the sink, watching Caleb color spaceships. He hummed to himself, innocent, safe, and yet not, because now the world knew something he didn't. And Ella, she didn't know how to live in that world. Her phone buzzed. "Mason, can we talk?" She stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back, "ELLA, doors open." When he arrived, she was waiting at the table. 2 mugs of tea sat untouched between them. She spoke first. "I can't stop thinking about it." "Me neither." "Not the test." "What then?" She looked up, eyes heavy. "What happens if it's true?" Mason didn't blink. "Then I'll find a way to be in his life without taking him from you." "You say that now." "I mean it." "Men always mean it until they don't." He exhaled. "I'm not your sister's mistake, Ella." "No, you're mine." That hurt more than he expected. After a long pause, he pulled out the envelope, placed it gently on the table. "I haven't done it yet." She stared at it, then whispered, "Why?" "Because I already feel like he's mine, and that scares the hell out of me." She nodded slowly, then said something that caught him off guard. "I don't need the paper, Mason. If you decide he's yours, he is." He looked at her, stunned. "I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to lock him away from you. I've lived my whole life without a father. I won't make Caleb do the same." Emotion surged in his chest. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I'm not doing this for you," she added. "I'm doing it for him." "I know." Later that night, Caleb wandered sleepily into the living room. "Why are you still up?" Ella asked, smoothing his hair. He looked at Mason on the couch, then asked the question neither of them were ready for. "Are you my dad?" Silence, so loud, it felt like the walls were listening. Ella knelt beside him. "Why do you think that?" "Because you look at him different, and he looks at me like he knows me." Mason swallowed. Ella blinked back tears. Finally, she said, "We don't know yet, but he might be." Caleb looked at Mason. "Do you want to be?" Mason answered without hesitation. "Yes." The next morning, Ella packed Caleb's school lunch in silence. Mason stood by the window, arms crossed. The sun broke through the clouds, soft and reluctant, just like them. "I sent the test," Mason said quietly. Ella nodded. "I didn't want to." He added, "I know. I need to be sure. For him." She understood, even if it tore her apart, because part of her feared what would happen if it was true. Would Mason fight for custody? Would he try to take Caleb away? Would the man she was starting to love become the man who broke her? That afternoon, Ella walked Caleb to school. He held her hand tight. Halfway there, he asked, "What happens if he's not my dad?" "Then he's still Mason." "And if he is?" She squeezed his hand. "Then we figure it out together." Mason stood in his office, staring at the city again. The phone buzzed. "Private number." He answered. "This is Mason Blake." "Mr. Blake, your results are ready." He paused. "Then tell me." The voice on the other end spoke clearly. "Caleb Alvarez is your biological son." Silence, breath, and something like gravity shifted inside him. He hung up, sat down, and let it sink in. He was a father. That evening, he returned to the apartment. Ella opened the door before he could knock. "You know, she said quietly. He nodded. Are you okay? He shook his head. No. And yes, I don't know. She stepped aside. Caleb was at the table, reading. Mason walked over. The boy looked up. Is it true? Mason nodded. I'm your dad. Caleb blinked, then said, Can I still call you Mason? Mason smiled. You can call me anything you want. The boy thought for a moment, then whispered, Dad's okay too. And just like that, the world changed. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, broken boy choosing to trust. Ella stood in the doorway, watching. A part of her broke, and a part of her healed. At the same time. Because love does that. It destroys and rebuilds. All in one breath. The following morning, the penthouse was too quiet, too clean, too curated. Mason stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at Chicago's skyline. But all he could see was Caleb's sketchbook left behind on his desk. Spaceships, stars, and a little stick figure labeled, Me and Dad. He hadn't been called that word in a decade, never expected to be called it at all. But now it lived in him like breath. And just as he began to adjust to that feeling, the elevator doors opened behind him. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. Still brooding, Mason? His mother's voice cut through the room like a cold wind. Vivian Blake, matriarch of the Blake legacy. Flawless posture, pearls always centered, judgment in every syllable. He turned. Morning, Mother. She eyed the room. You missed the foundation dinner. Again. I had a reason. Let me guess, she said dryly, setting her bag down. A reason with cheap shoes and a child not yours. Mason's jaw tensed. He is mine. Vivian blinked once, then twice. Excuse me. His name is Caleb. He's 10. His biological mother was Melissa Alvarez. You remember her. Vivian's face froze. The name was not unfamiliar. And the girl, her name is Ella. She's Melissa's sister. She's raised Caleb since he was a baby. His mother's eyes sharpened like ice under pressure. And now you've decided to what? Playhouse. Mason didn't flinch. No. I've decided to show up, like I should have 10 years ago. Vivian walked to the sideboard, poured herself sparkling water, and said, almost casually, we can fix this. There's nothing to fix. You can take custody. The boy is yours. Ella's not family, not legally. Mason stepped forward. She is family to him. Vivian sipped. Feelings don't sign inheritance papers. Mason's voice lowered. I'm not taking Caleb from her. His mother stared, then said it flat, final. You think the girl loves you. Wait until money complicates things. Mason exhaled. Mother, please. She's a poor girl. Mason, raised in debt, surviving on nothing. You think she won't see you as a ladder. She's never asked me for a dime. She won't have to. Because now the boy is yours, which means your entire legacy is vulnerable. Mason clenched his fists. Get out. Vivian blinked. What? I said, get out, before I say something I won't take back. For a moment, just a flicker of fear passed through her eyes. Then she set the glass down, straightened her coat, and walked toward the elevator. You'll see, Mason. The girl might love the man, but the world will only ever love the money. The doors closed behind her, and for the first time in years, Mason felt like a boy again, standing in front of a mountain dressed like a woman. Across town, Ella walked Caleb to school. He was quiet, too quiet. She finally asked, You okay? He looked up. If Mason's my dad, does that mean I leave you? She stopped cold, kneeled down. I level with him. Never, she whispered. No matter what happens, you're mine. Always. He looked down. But what if someone rich wants me? She realized. Someone had said something. That evening, Mason arrived at their apartment. His face was tight, pale. Ella opened the door. But this time, there was no smile. She stepped aside without a word. Inside, the lights were dim. Caleb was asleep. The air was tense. Mason turned. I need to tell you something. Ella crossed her arms. Was it your mother? His heart sank. Yes. She nodded like she'd expected it. She came here, too, had someone call the landlord, asked about eviction dates, tried to scare me. Mason's voice was calm, deadly calm. She did what? Ella held up a hand. It doesn't matter. Yes, it does. No, she said, voice breaking. Because this was always going to happen. Mason looked at her and saw it fear, shame, pride, and something worse. Resignation. She paced the room. You live in a world that has rules, legacies, reputation. I don't belong in that world, Mason. I don't want that world. But you are the world. Silence. I love Caleb, Mason said. I know. I want to build something with you. Ella's breath hitched. Then she whispered, what happens when your world decides I'm not enough? I decide who belongs in my world. But I've spent my entire life being told I wasn't allowed in certain rooms. That I wasn't born to deserve certain things. That I needed a man, a name, a check just to exist. He stepped forward. You don't need any of that with me. She looked up, eyes glassy, then broke. Finally, I believe you, she whispered. But I don't believe myself. He pulled her close, and this time, she didn't push him away. Later that night, they sat on the fire escape. City lights blinked like tired stars. Ella leaned on his shoulder, quiet, then said, your mom's not wrong. I am a threat, not because I want your money, but because you love me, Mason said. She looked up and nodded. That scares people like her more than gold diggers ever could. He kissed her forehead, soft, certain, and said, let them be afraid. Sunday afternoons in the Blake estate were designed to impress. Marble floors, chandeliers, staff with names no one cared to learn. And this Sunday, Vivian Blake decided it was time for proper introductions. Not for Ella, not for approval, but for control. Mason had been hesitant. This isn't the way, he told his mother. Then what is? Vivian countered, letting tabloids find out on their own. If you're set on claiming that boy is your heir, the family deserves to see him. It's not about claiming, Mason said. He's not a trophy. Vivian smiled, cold and flat. All the more reason to present him properly. Or not at all. Ella was uneasy from the start. The estate's gates alone made her stomach twist. Too high, too sharp. Like they were built to keep people like her out. But Mason squeezed her hand. Just stay close. I won't leave your side. She nodded. Caleb was in his best shirt, hair slicked awkwardly, eyes wide, uncertain. Is this where the kings live? He whispered. Ella knelt beside him. It's just a big house. That's all. He didn't look convinced. Inside, the drawing room buzzed with relatives. Aunts in pearls, uncles in blazers, cousins who never worked a day in their lives. All perfectly polished. All perfectly poisonous. Mason entered first. Ella followed, one hand on Caleb's back. The room turned, like a tide, like judgment. Vivian stood in the center composed, towering, lethal and Chanel. Everyone, she announced. This is Caleb, Mason's son. She didn't say it cruelly. She said it clinically, like a diagnosis. The silence that followed felt loud. A man coughed. Someone else sipped champagne. Too quickly. Then one of the cousins, Tabitha, maybe 25 and too entitled, tilted her head. Did you adopt him? No, Mason said. He's mine. Another silence. Then a chuckle from across the room. A bit sudden, isn't it? Someone muttered. Does he go to school? Another aunt asked, smiling in the way people do when they're already judging the answer. Yes, Ella replied sharply. He's top of his class. They blinked. As if startled, the girl could speak. Later, Mason and his uncle stepped into the study. Ella was left with Vivian, and Caleb wandered off exploring. He ended up in the back hall, where two women whispered by the staircase. They didn't see him, but he heard them. I heard she was homeless before this, with a child that isn't even hers. I wouldn't let my kids play with someone like that. Poor boy. Must be so confused. First he's no one. Now he's a Blake. They laughed, soft, cruel. Caleb didn't move. He just stood there, frozen, then turned and ran. Mason found him first, curled up behind a curtain, fist clenched in his lap. Hey, Mason knelt. What happened? Caleb didn't look up. You okay, buddy? Caleb's voice was tiny. Do I not belong here? Mason's heart cracked. He scooped the boy up, held him close, and whispered, "You belong with me. That's all that matters." Caleb trembled, then asked something worse. "Are they right? Am I not your real kid?" Mason pulled back, cupped his son's face. "Listen to me, Caleb. There is nothing more real in this world than you." The boy nodded, barely, but something inside him had shifted, and Mason felt it. Ella found them minutes later. She saw Caleb's red eyes, saw the way he clung to Mason's sleeve, and she knew. "They got to him, didn't they?" she asked softly. Mason nodded. "I'm taking you both home." Back in the car, silence reigned. Caleb dozed off in Ella's lap. She stared out the window, then finally spoke. "This is what you wanted to show him." "No," Mason said. "This is what I wanted to protect him from." "He's 10, Mason." But he heard every word. "I'll make it right." She looked at him. "Can you?" Mason gripped the wheel tighter. "I'll burn every bridge before I let anyone shame him again." Ella believed him, but that wasn't the question. The question was, could he protect them forever? The next morning, Mason showed up at Blake Tower. He bypassed the boardroom, the assistants, the protocols. He walked straight into Vivian's office. She was sipping espresso, reading society papers. She didn't look up until he said, "You will never speak to him again." Vivian didn't flinch. "He's my grandson. You made that clear yesterday. You're being emotional. I'm being a father. Don't confuse guilt with integrity." Mason stepped closer, voice low, sharp. "If you ever come near Caleb or Ella again, if you so much as whisper their names to anyone, I'll have every share in this company frozen, and every trust in my name stripped of Blake influence." Vivian set her cup down, eyes narrowed. "You would burn this family down for them." Mason didn't blink. "I would build a new one." That night, he showed up at Ella's apartment. She opened the door, already bracing for bad news. He held up a key. "I bought a place, quiet, safe, no marble, no chandeliers, just space." She blinked. "For us." "For you." She stared. "Will you come with me?" "I don't need saving," she whispered. "I know, but maybe I do." Her eyes softened. Then finally, she nodded, and somewhere inside, the girl who once believed she'd never be wanted began to hope again. It started with a headline, big, bold, and brutal. Blake Air involved with ex-con's sister, child's paternity in question. Underneath it, photos of Ella, carrying groceries, leaving her job, walking Caleb to school, and worst of all, a blurry image of her teenage self, handcuffed, tears in her eyes. Mason saw it first, a news alert blinking on his phone as he stepped out of a meeting. His blood went cold. He opened the link. There she was. There they all were. His family, his heart, on display, twisted into scandal. He knew exactly where it came from. Vivian. Across the city, Ella stood in the back room of the cafe, hands shaking as she stared at the screen. The article had gone viral. Sources confirm Ella Alvarez, formerly connected to gang-related charges in her teens, is now involved with billionaire CEO Mason Blake, raising questions about the legitimacy of their relationship and the child's true parentage. She couldn't breathe. She dropped the phone. Outside, she heard whispers. The girl at the counter, the one dating the billionaire, she was arrested, you know. They said she'd changed her name. What if she trapped him? Poor guy. Can't trust anyone these days. Ella fled through the back exit. She ran home, locked the door, closed the blinds. Caleb was still at school. Thank God. She couldn't let him see this. Not yet. Not ever. Mason arrived 20 minutes later. She didn't open the door at first. He knocked again and again. Finally, her voice hoarse, shaking, came through. "Go away." "No, Mason. I saw it." "Then go." He didn't. He stood there, forehead against the door, and whispered, "None of it changes what I feel." Inside, she slid down the wall. Tears fell silently. Then, "You don't know what it's like to have your shame go viral. I know what it's like to lose everything and still not be free." She opened the door. Slow. He stepped inside, saw the fear in her eyes. She handed him the phone. "Caleb can't see this. I can't let him grow up thinking he came from dirt. Mason sat beside her. You didn't come from dirt. I came from nothing, Mason. No, he said. You came from fire. Later that night, Mason's lawyers traced the leak confirmed what he already knew. Vivian had hired a private investigator weeks ago. She gathered records, mugshots, expunged files Ella thought were buried, then fed it to the tabloids. Strategically, ruthlessly. He could sue. He could retaliate, but he knew that wouldn't take back the hurt. The next day, Ella kept Caleb home from school. She stayed off her phone, off the news, off the streets. But the whispers found her anyway. Neighbors stared. Mothers pulled their children closer. Even the manager at the diner gave her a look before handing over her final paycheck. I can't have this kind of press here, Ella. I'm sorry. She nodded. Didn't argue. She just left. By evening, her eyes were hollow. She sat in the apartment, holding Caleb close as he asked why no one was texting him back. I thought Jordan was my best friend. You still are, she said. He frowned. Then why did his mom say I couldn't come over anymore? Her voice broke, because sometimes people are mean when they're scared. Caleb stared at her, then whispered, Are you scared too? She nodded. That night, Mason stood in front of a podium, unannounced, unscheduled. He faced the press, hundreds of cameras flashing like gunfire, and said clearly, without notes, My name is Mason Blake. I built my company from scratch. I've made mistakes. I've made money, but nothing I've ever done matters more than the woman I love. And the boy who calls me dad. Reporters gasped. He kept going. Ella Alvarez is not a scandal. She's not a story. She's my family. And I will protect her the same way she's protected the boy every day of his life. Another flash. Another question shouted from the crowd. Do you confirm the child is yours? Yes. And you're standing by this woman despite her record? Mason looked straight into the cameras. I'm standing by her because of who she is now, not who the system tried to make her. Silence. He ended with one line. You can write what you want, but from now on, write it knowing I'm not hiding. Ella watched the live broadcast from her couch. Tears streaked her face. Caleb climbed into her lap halfway through, confused but curious. Why is Mason on TV? She held him close. He's telling the world what matters. The next morning, tabloids spun a new story. Blake's CEO declares love in emotional press conference. Mason Blake defends single mother amidst scandal. Billionaire's heart belongs to ex-con's sister, and he's not apologizing. Ella read them all, still shaking. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from relief. He hadn't run. He hadn't folded. He'd chosen her, out loud, in public, for real. That night, Mason returned. No speech, no flowers, just him standing in the doorway. Ella stepped into his arms without a word, and Caleb, half asleep, walked over in mismatched pajamas and wrapped his arms around both their legs. Mason reached down, scooped him up, held them both, not perfectly, but completely. The new house wasn't huge. No doorman, no elevator, no $1 million art hanging on the walls. It smelled like fresh paint and cinnamon. The floors creaked into spots. The backyard had a crooked fence, and the kitchen window overlooked the parking lot. But to Ella, it felt like the first breath after drowning. Home. They moved in on a Tuesday. No photographers, no press, just cardboard boxes, paper plates, and 3 hands working side by side. Caleb cleaned the smallest room and immediately filled it with stars, plastic glow-in-the-dark ones. That Mason helped him stick to the ceiling. They'll protect your dreams, Mason said. Caleb grinned. They're not as cool as real stars, though. They're brighter, Mason replied, because you can see them even in the dark. Ella watched from the hallway, and for the first time in months, she smiled without guilt. That Friday, Mason picked Caleb up from school. The boy was quiet on the ride home. Mason glanced over. Rough day. Not really. You miss your old friends. Caleb shrugged, then whispered, They don't talk to me anymore. Mason's grip on the wheel tightened. I'm sorry, kiddo. It's okay. I have you now. That sentence stayed with Mason long after the engine stopped. That night, Ella found him sitting alone in the kitchen, flipping through a notebook. "What's that?" she asked. "Calendar. For Caleb's birthday." Ella raised an eyebrow. He never really had one. Mason looked up. Then it's Tom. 2 days later, they transformed the backyard. Streamers, balloons, a table made from the sawhorses and a wooden plank. Ella baked the cake herself, chocolate, imperfect, and lopsided. Caleb didn't care. When he saw it, his eyes lit up like it was made of gold. "There's my name on it," he beamed. "Like actually my name." Ella blinked fast, trying not to cry. They invited no one, just the three of them. Mason lit the candles. Ella held the knife. Caleb made the wish, then paused. "Mommy." "Yeah, baby, can I wish out loud?" "Sure." He looked at Mason, then back at her, and said, loud and clear, "I wish this stays forever." After the cake, they sat under the string lights Mason had clumsily nailed to the fence. Caleb fell asleep in a lawn chair, frosting still on his cheek. Ella and Mason stayed close, knees touching, silent, soft. Then she whispered, "He's never made a wish before." Mason turned. "Why not?" "Because wishes never felt safe." He didn't answer. He just reached for her hand, held it, let it say everything. Later that night, Mason carried Caleb to bed, tucked him in, and before turning off the light, he paused. The boy stirred. "Dad." "Yeah, I wasn't scared this year." Mason leaned down. "Why's that?" "Because this time I knew who would be there when I woke up." Back in the living room, Ella waited on the couch. Mason joined her. They didn't turn on the TV, didn't check their phones, just sat there, together. She leaned into him, voice barely above a whisper. "I used to think love was survival." He wrapped an arm around her. "And now I think it's staying." And in the little house with the creaky floors and crooked fence, a new kind of family quietly took root. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. It started with a missed call, then 2, then 3, from a number Mason hadn't seen in years. He didn't answer at first, didn't want to, but on the 4th ring, instinct took over. He stepped outside, glanced at the screen, then finally picked up. "Hello," a familiar voice, soft, cool, rehearsed. "Mason, it's Julia." Silence. Then, "Didn't think I'd hear from you again." "I'm in Chicago," she said, "just for a few days. I'd like to meet. It's important." Julia was once the woman everyone expected Mason to marry. CEO of a successful fintech firm, polished and strategic, the kind of woman Vivian Blick approved of thoroughly. They had broken things off 5 years ago. No scandal, no heartbreak, just emptiness. They had everything except love. That afternoon, Mason met her at a hotel lounge. Neutral ground. The moment he walked in, Julia stood graceful, poised in a beige suit. She smiled. "You look the same." Mason returned it, but barely. "You don't." She laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." He sat. They exchanged small talk, business, press, the economy. Then she leaned in. "I've been following the stories about Ella, the boy." Mason stiffened. She raised a hand. "I'm not here to judge." "Then why are you here?" Julia hesitated. "I have a proposition. Not romantic, strategic." "Of course. Always strategic." "I'm launching a foundation, education equity. We're expanding into underserved areas." "You've got a story now, Mason. A real one. You, a child, a former foster guardian." He cut her off. "She's not a peer move." Julia's voice dropped. "That's not what I'm saying." He stared at her, hard, then said, "Thank you for reaching out, but I've already chosen my story." And he walked away. What Mason didn't know was that across the street behind a cafe window, Ella had just stepped out with Caleb after a tutoring session. She had turned just in time to see Mason with Julia, laughing, touching her hand, leaning close, then walking away. Ella stood frozen, the world muted, everything inside her hollowed out. That evening, Mason returned home. Ella was on the porch, alone. He smiled. "Hey." She didn't answer. He noticed, paused. "What's wrong?" Her voice was razor thin. "Who is she?" He blinked. "Who?" "The woman you were with." He frowned. "Wait, you saw us." Ella stood. You said you were in meetings. You didn't mention her. It wasn't like that. Then what was it, Mason? He hesitated, just long enough for her to feel the space between them widen. She's from the past, he said. We had coffee. Why? She asked for a meeting. I went. No warning. I didn't think it mattered. That was the wrong answer. Ella's eyes glassed over. Of course it doesn't. Because I'm just the girl who came from nothing. You don't owe me the kind of transparency. Don't twist this. I'm not twisting anything. I saw it. Mason stepped forward. It meant nothing. That's what scares me, she whispered. He stopped. What does that mean? It means you're used to doing things that mean nothing and not telling anyone. The words hung between them. Heavy, brutal, true. That night, Mason slept on the couch. Not because she asked him to, because he couldn't bear to look at her and see all the trust he'd just cracked. Ella lay in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling stars Caleb had stuck on, and wondered, was I always just a chapter in his story? The next morning, she didn't speak, didn't text, didn't cook breakfast. Mason drove Caleb to school in silence. The boy noticed. Is Mama mad? Mason forced a smile. We just had a misunderstanding. Did you say sorry? I'm trying. Try harder, Caleb said. And Mason had never felt more humbled by a 10-year-old. That afternoon, Ella walked downtown alone. She passed by the cafe, by the hotel, by the street where she saw her, and ended up at the old church steps where she used to sit as a teenager trying to figure out what survival looked like. She sat there again. Older is stronger, but not immune. She didn't cry. She just stayed still. Because sometimes stillness is all a person can afford when their heart's at war. Back home, Mason waited, paced, checked the time, checked it again. When she finally walked in, he stood immediately. Ella, please, don't, she said. He froze. I just need to ask one thing, she continued. Anything? Do you love me? He didn't flinch. Yes. Then act like it. Mason exhaled. I know I should have told you. I know it looked wrong. It was wrong, she said, not because you cheated, but because you didn't think about me. Silence. Then she whispered, that's worse. He stepped closer, slowly. I want this life, with you, with Caleb. I'm not confused, Ella. I'm committed. She looked up, searching his face. For truth, for cracks, for everything. Then she said, don't ever let me see her again. You won't. That night, they didn't kiss. They didn't hold each other. But when they went to bed, they shared the same blanket, same pillow, same breath. And sometimes, that's enough. It was a Thursday, ordinary in every way. Caleb had school. Ella had a shift at the bookstore. Mason was in back-to-back calls with investors. Everything felt manageable. Even after the tension from Julia's reappearance, things had started to mend. Ella smiled more. Mason brought flowers home. Caleb talked about planets again. They were trying, and trying felt like progress. That afternoon, Ella picked Caleb up from school just like always. Except, he wasn't there. Not in the classroom. Not in the cafeteria. Not on the playground. The teacher walked over, smiling politely. He said his uncle was picking him up today. You didn't send anyone. Ella froze. Her hands dropped the lunch bag. I don't have a brother, she said. The teacher's smile faded. By the time she reached Mason, her voice was shaking. Caleb's gone. He was silent for a full second too long. What? He left school with someone he thought he knew. Mason was already running. They searched everywhere. The streets, the bookstore, the apartment, even the shelter where Ella once lived. Nothing. No sign of him. Ella was frantic. He wouldn't just leave. He hates strangers. Mason tried to stay calm. We need the footage. Street cams, school exit doors. I'm calling every contact I have. Ella grabbed his shirt. Do you think she took him? Vivian. The name hadn't been spoken in weeks. Mason paused, then said quietly, if she did, I swear to God. Within the hour, Mason's private security had accessed the school's cameras. They found it. A black town car pulling up. A man in a blazer steps out, pulls up a sign. Caleb Blake. The boy walks to him, smiling, trusting. He opens the car door and disappears. Ella was beside herself. It was so easy, she whispered. All it took was one lie. Mason clenched his jaw. I know who that man is. He showed her a photo. His mother's attorney. The same man who once tried to bribe Ella with a check to disappear. Ella's eyes went wide. She took him. Mason stood. I'm going to her. Ella followed him to the door. Mason, what if she doesn't give him back? He looked her dead in the eyes. She will. Vivian Blake lived on the 42nd floor of a glass tower that looked like it didn't know how to bend. Mason stormed past the doorman, past security, into her penthouse. She stood near the window already waiting. Mason, where is he? She didn't flinch. In the guest room. He's safe. Calm down. You took him from school. I protected him. Mason exploded. From who? Vivian's voice stayed ice cold. From her. From the circus you've created. The press. The scandal. The local aspirator on our name. You had no right. I had every right. The child has Blake blood. He deserves stability. He had stability. Mason roared. He had love. Vivian narrowed her eyes. You're too blinded to see she's using you. You're too arrogant to see I love her. Silence. Then, if you ever pull this again, I will ruin you. Do you understand me? Vivian's expression didn't change, but she stepped aside. The door opened, and Caleb stood there, wide-eyed, silent. Mason. He ran. Mason dropped to his knees, caught him in his arms, held him, felt him breathe, and finally, let himself break. Back home, Ella met them at the door. When she saw Caleb safe, alive, she sank to her knees. He rushed to her. Momomi thought it was okay. He had a sign near your name. It's not your fault, she whispered over and over. It's not your fault. They stayed like that for a long time, tangled in relief, drenched in love. That night, after Caleb fell asleep curled between them, Ella turned to Mason. Eyes puffy raw. You're his father. He nodded. You love him more than anything. She hesitated, then asked, and me? Mason didn't answer with words. He kissed her, not hungry, not rushed, but full of everything they'd almost lost. Afterward, they sat in the quiet. She leaned into his chest. I thought I lost him. So did I. She looked up. I can't do this if we're going to keep being attacked. We won't, he said. I'm serious, Mason. I know. And I'm done playing gentle. The next morning, Mason made a call. Legal, final, cold. He cut ties with every trust controlled by Vivian, withdrew his name from the Blake Foundation, transferred all assets into a new holding one with Caleb's name as heir. Then he wrote a statement. Public, firm. If being a Blake means rejecting the people I love, then I don't want the name. And he signed it. Mason, father first, CEO second. Ella read the statement on the couch. She didn't cry. She smiled. Because finally, she didn't feel like a guest in someone else's life. She felt like home. The air felt different now. Quieter, safer, but not settled. Because even after cutting ties with his past, even after saving Caleb, even after proving again and again that he would fight for this family, Mason still hadn't said the words. The forever ones. And Ella, she wasn't sure if she could believe them even if he did. 2 weeks passed. The quiet grew warmer. The mornings were slow and sweet. Caleb started drawing again superheroes and dinosaurs, and family portraits with Mason in the middle. Ella found herself humming while doing dishes. They were healing, one breath at a time. One Friday night, after Caleb had fallen asleep early on the couch, Mason turned to her. His eyes steady, his voice soft. I've been carrying something. She blinked. What? He stood, walked to the drawer, pulled out a small box. Black, simple, no brand name. He held it out. She stared. Mason, I know what you're going to say. No, you don't. Yes. He said, I do. He opened the box. Inside a delicate gold ring. No diamonds, no flash. Just a thin band, engraved on the inside. You made me real. Ella stepped back, shook her head. I can't. You can. I shouldn't. He stayed still. I love you. She whispered, "That's not the problem." "Then what is?" Her voice cracked. "It's me, Mason. I'm the problem." She turned away, started pacing, hands shaking. "I come with baggage. I've been broke, arrested, shamed on the front page. People whisper when I walk by. They stare at Caleb like he's something tragic, and you're you. You were born into towers and billion-dollar companies and clean records. You're not supposed to end up with someone like me." Mason didn't flinch. "You're right." She stopped cold. "What? You're not the kind of person I was supposed to end up with. You're better." Silence. "I don't want the life I was born into. I want the life I chose, and I'm choosing you." Tears brimmed in her eyes, but she still shook her head. "I'm scared, Mason." "So, am I?" He stepped forward, took her hand. "I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for real. For late nights and grocery store fights and burnt toast and mismatched socks. And one bathroom mirror between the three of us." She laughed through the tears. He squeezed her hand. "I'm asking for all of it, with you." Then he knelt down. "Marry me, Ella." She dropped to her knees, too, face in her hands, and whispered, "I need time." He nodded, didn't pressure her, didn't flinch. "I can wait." That night, she sat alone on the porch, barefoot, wrapped in one of Mason's hoodies. The ring sat next to her, in its open box, catching the moonlight. She thought about her mother, her sister, about growing up in corners. Always second, always almost. Could someone like her be someone's first choice? The door opened. Mason stepped out, didn't speak, just sat beside her. After a long silence, she said, "Do you know what it's like to never believe you're enough?" "Yes," he replied. She looked at him. "You?" He nodded. "My whole life, I was a number, a legacy, a pure image, not a person." She leaned into his shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her. "I don't need you to be perfect, Ella. I just need you to stay." She closed her eyes. "I want to." "Then let that be enough, for now." The next morning, she wore the ring on a chain around her neck. Not on her finger. Not yet, but close. And that was a start. It wasn't a cathedral. There were no string quartets, no designer gowns, no headline-worthy guests, but it was beautiful. The ceremony was held in a garden behind the house they'd made their home. Twinkling lights strung across trees, wooden benches, a small arch Mason built himself, and wildflowers. Lots of wildflowers picked by Caleb and tied with kitchen twine. Ella stood behind the screen door, heart thudding. She wore a simple dress, ivory, second-hand, fitted to her like it had always belonged to her. Her hair was down, just the way Mason liked it, and around her neck was the chain she'd worn for weeks. Only now, the ring was on her finger, where it belonged. The music started, soft acoustic guitar, played by Mason's college friend. Guests stood. No press, no brands, just people who mattered. The bookstore manager, her old neighbor from the shelter, two of Mason's old college friends, a woman from Caleb's school who helped tutor him after the scandal. And then, Caleb, 10 years old, in a vest a sizes too big, shoes slightly mismatched, but with the most important job of the day. He walked slowly, straight down the aisle, carrying nothing, just confidence. And when he reached the front, he turned, held out his hand, and waited. Ella stepped outside. The sun hit her face like a blessing. She took a breath, saw Mason standing at the altar. Dark suit, no tie, eyes soft and fixed on her like she was the only light left in the world. And she walked. Not quickly, not fearfully. She walked with knowing, with choice, with everything she used to think made her less than now worn like armor. Halfway down, Caleb took her hand. Didn't say a word, just squeezed, like he was the glue, because he was. He was the reason she stayed, the reason Mason fought, the reason they all believed. At the altar, Mason stepped forward, took both their hands. The officiant spoke, but the words blurred. All Ella could hear was the wind in the trees. All Mason could see was her, and all Caleb could feel was warmth. When the vows came, they spoke from paper, shaky, handwritten, imperfect, but real. Mason's voice cracked. "I've had everything. But nothing made sense until you taught me how to choose love, not legacy. And I promise to protect what we built, not because it's fragile, but because it's precious. Ella's voice trembled. I thought I'd always be second. That love like this wasn't for people like me. But you didn't just give me a home. You let me belong. And I promise, even when I doubt myself, I'll never doubt us again. Caleb smiled wide. Someone sniffled in the back row. Maybe everyone. When they kissed, it wasn't fireworks. It wasn't cinematic. It was breath and truth. And finally, later, under lanterns and cake crumbs, they danced in the grass. No first dance, no bouquet toss, just three people in mismatched shoes, on a patched blanket, in a backyard full of stars. Caleb sat on Mason's shoulders, shouting, "You're my dad now." And Mason laughed so hard he nearly dropped the kid. Ella pulled them both close and whispered, "We made it." Because they had, not perfectly, but powerfully, not with diamonds, but with intention, not from the world's approval, but from each other's belief. And somewhere, in that tiny backyard lit by fairy lights and love, a poor girl became a wife, a billionaire became a man, and a boy who had no one became the glue that held everything together.